Good afternoon. I'm Dave Lubach, Executive Editor for the Facilities Market of Trade Press Media Group. Thank you for joining today's Fireside Chat, ESCOs, Energy and the Evolving Facility Landscape. But before we get started with today's event, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. We do encourage audience questions throughout the discussion. So to submit questions, please navigate to the Q&A Ask Questions module at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions at any time. To successfully earn 0.1 CEUs, you must watch 40 minutes or more of the webcast. You can download your certificate at the completion of the webcast in the Earn Certification module. Today's webcast will also be archived at facilitiesnet.com/webcast. Today's learning objectives include understanding how ESCOs are evolving to support facility priorities beyond energy savings, learning the role of ESCOs in infrastructure, resilience, security, and sustainability, and also previewing some upcoming presentations and insights from NFMT Remix, at NFMT Remix and at NAESCO's R3 conference. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Timothy Unruh, Executive Director of NAESCO, also known as the National Association of Energy Service Companies. Tim manages the representation of its member energy service companies. NAESCO provides advocacy for the industry at the federal, state, and local levels and provides for member company accreditation. Prior to this role, Tim was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Renewable Power at the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office at the U.S. Department of Energy. As a Deputy Assistant Secretary, Tim managed the nation's renewable power research while also providing oversight to the Grid Modernization Initiative. He has doctorates, master's, and bachelor's degrees in electrical engineering from Wichita State University in Wichita, Kansas. Tim, thanks for joining us today. Hope you're having a good day so far.
It's a great day.
Great. So just want to have a little conversation here back and forth. We did this in April as well, and maybe kind of update for the people who attended, last time, maybe see what updates are in the ESCO world today. And maybe for those who are still kind of new to the experience, new to ESCOs, wondering what they're about, let's maybe start there before, doing a deeper dive so you maybe tell everybody a little bit, Tim, exactly what an ESCO is, scope of work involved, and what kind of facilities benefit from them.
Okay, so an energy service company, as we've been calling it ESCO, is a company that does energy-based retrofits of buildings. Now, many of the things that they do are broad scope types items. So retrofits related to energy can be things like the obvious things: heating, ventilation, air conditioning. They can be doors, they can be windows, they can be roofs, all the common things. But they also include things like water retrofits. They include things that could be maybe outsourced power retrofits. So you may have solar panels, or possibly it's a ground source heat pump system for K through 12 schools, for example. There's sometimes landscaping that's involved. It could involve things with fields. But ESCOs also can help with things like resiliency and cybersecurity. Those are all expertises that ESCOs have. So it's a pretty broad-based facility renovation infrastructure improvement. A lot of times we like to say it's a robust infrastructure improvement opportunity with an ESCO. And so the energy service company is kind of your go-to for a broad range of services. What their general model is called an energy savings performance contract. And that's not all the work they do, but that's a big part of it. An energy savings performance contract is a set of work that is based off of a savings model. The savings can be energy savings. It can be operational savings. You might have a contract to provide some services. They might be able to find a way to do that contract for a lower price. It could be supplying power to come in to help replace some of the utility costs with lower cost power. But what happens is they'll come in and audit your facility, and they'll determine a package of what they think the savings can be and what the scope of work is to accomplish that savings. Now, here's the thing that's the catch is they have to balance the cost with the savings because they're using the savings to pay for the installation. Many types of government facilities are key users of this contract, and they can do contracts for, say, 20 years, for example. And what they'll do is they'll match up the savings over 20 years with the costs, and they'll do a life cycle cost assessment and make sure that those savings can pay for those costs. What's unique about many government facilities is they're given annual budgets and expected to spend annually, but they're told to spend their money in a life cycle cost-effective fashion. performance contract is a great way to bridge those two anomalies, because annual money obviously says buy at the cheapest you can for first cost. Don't worry about the life cycle cost. But a performance contract allows you to make that into a life cycle cost decision and make the best approach. Energy service companies are unique in that they stay with the project during the life. A regular contractor will come in, they'll install your work. A design build will design it, install it, but only an ESCO has the reason to stay with the project over the lifetime to help you through issues, to verify performance, and possibly even continue to train and provide services through that entire life of the contract as you work through maybe the 20-year contract that you have. These types of projects are done primarily today by government facilities. There are other models of a similar structure called energy as a service. We have one called Sustainable Capital Improvement Program, and those are project modules that can be more applicable to private sector or public sector, and they involved possibly an ownership of the assets in the building, could be an ongoing service type equation, could be a payment for services delivered with key performance indicators provided by the energy service company. So there's a lot of different models, but the performance contracting model is the one that's the primary basis, and it's done for public buildings, which are roughly 25% of all the buildings in the U.S. And how they do that is the federal government and all states have legislation that allows some form of performance contracting to occur. Each state and the federal government is unique and different. And so as an energy service company goes to market, they have to provide a specific delivery mechanism that matches the legislation in that particular state. So it's a complex delivery model that changes with every type of client that you work with. Some states have different rules for universities, K through 12 schools, state and local buildings. So there's a different structure everywhere you go. But it is a robust model. It is one that has been around for a long time. There's often, when people in facilities look at a possibility of doing a performance contract, they may find that it's the first time they've ever looked at one. And the reason is that it's a 20-year contract. If a person stays at a facility, they may only do one in their career. But rest assured, it is one that has standards. We have a formal accreditation program at NAESCO to validate the contractors that they work well. It really works out well that there's a lot of support and tools. There's even an industry of owners representatives that can come in on an owner's side and help navigate the process. So it's a tried and true method. It's not all that well known sometimes, but it is a great opportunity to come in and improve your facilities with a comprehensive approach.
Okay. You'd answered one of my upcoming questions was regarding, and of course, in this facilities world and energy, we hear so many of the acronyms. You addressed kind of the ESPC, which is one thing I wanted to let people kind of know, that's probably an acronym they might hear a lot during this conversation, and you described what that is, so I think we're good there. But in terms of that, real good description there, Tim, but compared to like normal projects, like somebody would say, we're doing a normal energy saving project. How different is an ESCO project compared to
there's a lot of key differences. So if you're going to do a normal project, that's assuming a project that you've had someone design for you. So you came up with an idea that says, I think we're going to do this to reduce our energy costs. You have a contractor maybe design that for you. Then you have a contractor build that for you. The difference with working with an ESCO is that they are working with the savings and the costs together to make sure that they work in the best fashion. For example, an energy service company is not likely to always go pick the cheapest equipment that they can install to achieve the energy savings. And the reason is they come with a large set of experience that may say, we have learned that this approach won't achieve the savings that you desire. Because we've tried this on projects. We have to live with our projects for many years. And we think that if you go over and spend 5% more on this other piece, you'll actually get the savings. And that's important to them since they guarantee the savings over the life of the contract. If they put in a product that does not perform, they have to make up the difference. That's what a guarantee is all about. They also have experience in the ability of equipment to last long. So if they have experience with a certain approach that does not provide a long-term productive environment that works, they're going to recommend going a different route. And so the expertise you get is not just a low bid, quick installation, hey, we're done. we're out of here, we have a year warranty and we're done. The ESCO has effectively 20 years to work with you and wants to make sure that they install the best approach that they can. So there's a lot of difference there. There's a difference in the way the process develops, which is probably even a larger difference than what I just described. As you're developing a project, you work in tandem with the energy service company to not only determine the scope, so you tell them what you'd like to see happen, they come in and tell you what the possibilities are, and you mesh that together into the project that's the best fit for both of you. But then once they do that, you work with them to pick the equipment type. So if your staff has a certain brand that they know how to operate, they know how to maintain it, clean it, take care of it, and they're very comfortable with it, and the local representative provides great service, they may say, we like brand X. And the ESCO can ensure that brand X is what goes in there and make sure that that's the one that works the best, because the best solution for the client is also going to be the best solution for the energy service company. Those are some of the subtle differences. But when you get into problems, we're doing construction in existing facilities. We're always going to have problems. If somebody comes in and says you're never going to have a problem with our construction project, they're probably not telling the truth. A construction project in an existing building is a challenging project indeed, because you never know what you're going to find as you take apart the building and begin to reassemble those pieces. The energy service company has an obligation, because they develop the scope of work, they're delivering the scope of work, to make it right for the client. They'll always work at that type of thought. It's how do I make it right for the client?
Okay. Yeah. So let's, I guess, kind of shift into, money and energy savings, since it's obviously something everybody's always interested in. And obviously one way to benefit from ESCOs is to leverage them with other capital for costs and things. And I know you have some really good information here, Tim, and we're not going to have a ton of slide presentations here, but Tim also has a few slides here to kind of further illustrate the value here. So feel free to take over the slide presentation there, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So leveraging is kind of a newer concept in energy savings performance contracts, but we've done some studies and some analysis and learned that there's a real opportunity. There is a paper by Oak Ridge National Laboratories that talks about leveraging additional funds into a project. And what we're talking about is most facilities have some funds to do something, but it's never they have all the funds to do everything. And so if you have some funds to do something, if you combine those funds with an energy savings performance contract, the savings from the funds you have combined with the savings from the performance contract takes $1 of your money and $1 of the savings money. When you combine them together, you get more than $2 of retrofit. And the reason is because you get that savings flowing in that adds in additional measures. I used to work at an energy service company, and I was an engineer and I developed projects. And so I went back and pulled one of my projects in the past, and I said, all right, let me look at this project and see how this would have worked if we thought about this in leveraging. And so I have a project with some examples I'm going to show, and it's a real project. It's a project that I built. It's a project that I was involved in the guarantee for at least 15 years. So it's a long-term project that was successful. But when you look at it, it's a really interesting piece to see how leveraging provides a benefit. And so you're putting up the slide that shows the $1 in energy savings plus $1 equals greater than $2. That's the biggest piece. This was verified in a study done by Oak Ridge National Lab by John Schonder. It's a great little study, but I think my example might be a little clearer to help understand. So let me go through what we have going on here. So I had a site, and they were planning to do a project, and they had $2 million that they had gotten from wherever they got their money. And they were going to spend this money. And so this is the project that they were going to do. They had various boiler replacements and conversions and HVAC upgrades they were going to do. And as you can see, the project that they had planned was just north of what they had. They had $2,024,000 to go into for project costs. So just barely over their $2 million. This is the project that they thought they could do. And so you look, and the payback of this is really not a great energy payback, 44 years almost. I mean, that's what you'd expect, though. When you do things like boilers and a lot of types of HVAC upgrades, some of those things are very costly because they have a large piece of capital equipment that doesn't have a significant amount of savings. They have some savings, and they provide a lot of operational benefit, but overall, it just wasn't providing enough savings to pay for the project. This was a capital project. So we came in and we looked at what type of energy things would we want to do. And so you look at things we're looking at. We're doing water fixture retrofits, lighting retrofits. We've got a cooling system, various things in the project. And we came up with roughly a $2 million project also. And so you've got a $2 million energy project that pays for itself because we've got a 9.56 year payback. You can see at the very bottom right of the chart. Project provides about $2 million worth of work. Great energy project, one we'd like to do every day. You've got a great capital project for $2 million. You've got a great energy project for $2 million. Let's combine them and see what happens. So when we combine these things together, that $2 million of capital items had some energy. And I'm going to go back real quick and look at that energy. So that energy savings was, operational savings was $48,553 a year. The energy project savings was much greater because it pays for itself at $222,000 savings a year. Let's combine them together. And now we see we've got a project that is overall together. It's a little different because you've got some savings you get because when you combine these two projects and do them at the same time, you've got some mobilization savings, you've got some on-site engineering savings, project manager savings, and so forth. And so the overall costs are a little bit different than being $2,024,000 plus $2,018,000. And you get a little bit of a cost reduction there. But overall, if you take and do that project and you try to get an energy project and you need a payback of 10.59 years to meet their statutory requirement for this project, and 10.45 covers it, what happens here is that you see that all they need is $1.1 million in capital, not $2 million, to do the same project. The energy project came together and it freed up $900,000 that could be spent on further upgrades. And that's key. So you almost doubled that money. You got an extra $900,000 worth of work. And so what's key about this, when you look at this, is that combining the two projects together was better than doing two separate projects. You could have done these as two independent projects, spent $2 million, done a $2 million performance contract, and together you'd have had your roughly $4 million worth of work, and you'd have spent your $2 million. But by combining them, you get all the same work, but you've only spent $1.1 million. Make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I hope everybody sees the sense there, and obviously, money saving is a benefit. And yeah, just one other thing I was going to mention too, Tim, and I learned this at your conference last year, were just other ways that you can kind of support your ESCOs. And it was a school district from Kentucky that talked about stacking and using some of these other options available to pay for their projects. So, looking at like tax incentives, grants, rebates, they can also play into your energy savings performance contracts. And how can you use those avenues to help pay for your projects as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that we can find a project funding. One of the things that energy service companies do is they look for what are all the ways you can get funding. Depends on what state you're in. It depends on what type of a building it is. And there's a lot of different dependencies. But in each case, there's a pathway to find additional money. So one area that you find is utilities often have rebate money. Rebate money sometimes can be very lucrative. Sometimes it can be very challenging. It just depends upon how the program works and what type of money they have available. That's one way. Another way is there could be some government grants. We had quite a few grants available back with the investment tax credit. Those are kind of dwindling away now, but there were grants available for the investment tax credit for solar installations. That is fading away, and those are diminishing. But there's also a grant if you have a ground source heat pump need, and those are not going away. Those are still going to be around. The legislation changes at the federal government did not take away the tax credit for ground source heat pumps. So if you have an opportunity for those, it's still a great opportunity to try to move forward with that. Batteries storage can be a benefit for facility, help with resiliency. Those are still available. There also obviously can be capital monies from whatever funding source that you have. So there's several opportunities that you have to get money for your projects. And how an energy service company uses those is they basically become a capital contribution at the beginning of the project and help to buy down the project and make that payback much more appealing. Often what that does is that adds in additional measures. As you saw the list of measures in my previous examples, those measures are often ranked by shortest payback to longest payback. And what typically happens is the shorter payback items help provide savings for the longer payback items. And you get to a point where there's no more savings to buy any more retrofits for the facility, and you stop your project. If you have a capital infusion of either a utility rebate, a grant from a government, or capital money from your own funding authority, that then allows that next energy conservation measure and maybe even a few more next ones to come into the picture. Because usually what happens is they just barely don't make the cutoff, and a little bit of capital goes a long way to bringing them above the line and making them a part of the project. And what's unique about this is that once they come above the line, their savings comes with them. So while they didn't have a payback that was sufficient to carry the project, they still had some energy savings that continues to help drive the project forward. And as you add your capital and you add that additional savings, you get more and more of the energy conservation measures that you planned into your project paid for.
Before we go further here, Tim, there was a question regarding your project that you discussed, and Moni wanted to know if there were energy supplier rebates involved with that project.
That project did not have rebates or energy supply rebates in it at all. That was a pretty simple project. It was for a small city, and in that case, they had their cash, and that was the only capital contribution that came in.
Okay. Yeah, moving on here, talking about maybe some of the financial changes here that have maybe evolved with ESCOs and things over current years, and obviously with the change in administrations here in the White House from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, there's always changes financially and things. And one of the obvious changes was the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed in July by the Trump administration. How did that legislation and maybe just the approach of this administration in general, how does that impact like the ESCO relationships with facility managers and companies?
Well, it's interesting, Dave. Administrations come and go, and they each have their priorities. And what's interesting is the ESCO industry has lived through them all. We've been over 40 years at this, and we've gone through many administration changes. In reality, the administration changes, they can boost the industry, an artificial kind of boost for a period of time. It can cause changes. The big legislation that passed under the Biden administration was the Inflation Reduction Act. It added a lot of incentives. We got a boost in the investment tax credit, which was one of the biggest ones for our projects. And we had a boost in the what's called 179D, which is a tax deduction for energy efficient facilities. Those are really the only things that impacted us. And really for the tax credit, it was for ground source heat pumps and probably for solar installations is really where we saw the benefit. The One Big Beautiful Bill is taking away the solar piece, but it's not taking away the ground source heat pump piece. So that remains. The 179 did get taken away, and so that one also disappeared. So the impact is kind of mild for us. While it's not necessarily always favorable, it's not devastating for us, and the industry will go on. In some cases, some clients were concerned about the changes with the One Big Beautiful Bill, and they were waiting to approve projects. And so some ESCOs have told me that they saw projects actually start to flow once the bill passed, simply because the client now had stability in their decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How can facilities and operations leaders use ESPCs and partnerships with ESCOs as a strategy to achieve resilient facilities and doing it cost effectively?
Yeah, resiliency is an interesting case. We all want our facilities to be resilient. We want it to be able to protect. And so when we think about resiliency, there's kind of two sides to that. Reliability is kind of part of it, where we want a system to be able to withstand problems. And then resiliency is the ability to restore after we've had an impact on problems. And both of those go hand in hand to work together. Energy service companies tend to include resiliency components in their projects. They also often find that energy retrofits can be related to resiliency retrofits. One big resiliency thing that a lot of sites talk about is having microgrids to help try to control their power flows and make sure that they always have power available. So they want to make sure that they may have an on-site generation combined with the utility generation, or maybe they have some solar and batteries they want to try to coordinate. It could be a whole myriad of things, but that's often one of the things, and that's an energy type of thing. But there's often a lot of crossover between energy and resiliency. The challenge with resiliency that we have is that it's often difficult to completely pay for a resiliency upgrade with savings. And that's because we're expecting more from our facilities tomorrow than we expected from them in the past. In the past, we didn't think about resiliency quite so much. We didn't think about the fact that our high schools might be used for vaccination sites, for all things. It's just not something we plan for, and that may require a different configuration. And that cost may be small, it could be large to make that change and have that accommodation. So when we look at resiliency, we're trying to base the project off of savings when you work with an ESCO, but there may not be enough savings there. But the ESCO will work with you to find grants, rebates, other forms to help cover that, and they will be able to leverage that with any saving, any cost monies that you have from your funding budget.
Mm-hmm. Do you see lately, Tim, more resilience projects involving, prevention for hurricanes? I mean, we've seen some of these more intense hurricanes, not only along the coast, but you're heading up into the Carolinas and areas that usually you kind of think of as immune to these kind of storms. And then also the same breath, kind of resilience from wildfires. I mean, we see it a lot of times in California, on the West Coast, getting worse. And, we're in Milwaukee. I'm in Wisconsin. We get a lot of it from Canada, and it's even extending further south. I just did an article with somebody. They were worried about resilience for office buildings in Miami, of all places. Is that, do you see these trends developing more in these relationships and people pursuing that resilience in those areas?
Yeah, our ESCOs are asked to do a lot of different things, including resiliency, perhaps addressing a hurricane concern, which would be mostly flooding, or a fire concern, which is often landscaping, trying to keep the brush away from a building. They don't do all that much in the remediation for those types of disasters, simply because a lot of times those are more of a structural type of thing, and ESCOs may not do a whole lot of building structure. Doesn't mean they're not involved in those. They don't have quite as much to do with those. But they do get involved in all those cases with the power supply. And back to that microgrid I mentioned before, often a microgrid becomes the lifeline in a hurricane situation, because the first thing to go out in a hurricane situation is going to be the power supply. And as you lose that power supply, you're going to need to try to keep it going. So if you have a hospital, you want to keep it going. So you have maybe some diesel generators, maybe some solar and battery, maybe even a combined heat and power plant that's going to be operating in a way that can keep that system up and running. And a microgrid with its intelligent controls will be necessary to control and coordinate that, along with maybe intermittent utility. When it comes to the wildfires, the challenge there is the utilities are now turning off the power in advance when you have a wildfire situation, to prevent wildfires being caused by their power system, especially if there's high winds. Out in California, high winds will cause power to be cut off. There's where a microgrid again comes in to be a very good benefit. On the building side, when you're doing both of those things, when you're switching over to on-site auxiliary power, you're going to need building controls integrated with that to turn off things that may not be as mission critical. You may adjust your temperature settings and your lighting output, even your elevator operation, based on what's happening outside your building with the power supply. And so the ESCO works with the overall coordination with the control system, with the microgrid, to make sure that all of that's coordinated and operates in a proper fashion. Those are done probably for more of the more advanced sites when you get that, but it is something that we've done.
Okay. Moving on to, some of these, so people now, if you're curious, through this conversation and, hey, this is a new concept to me, I'm interested in learning more. Alan has a question here kind of leading us into our next stage of what we want to discuss here, and he's talking about how does one get involved in a partnership with ESCOs for a project. He's in South Carolina with government road maintenance facility, and just want to talk a little bit, Tim. If a facility manager is interested in learning more about an ESPC and identifying ESCOs with whom they want to partner with, what are maybe some of those first steps you would recommend that they take?
Yeah, Alan, it's great. Just last Friday, we had North Carolina on a call talking about their ESPC program, and we had a couple of ESCOs on that call. We had Johnson Control and Schneider on that call participating with us, along with someone from the North Carolina DEQ that runs their ESCO program. So I don't know South Carolina's structure, but I'm sure you have an energy office in South Carolina that can help coordinate this. And I'm certain that there are energy service companies in the state. To find an energy service company, you can go to my website, naesco.org, naesco.org, and you can look at the members and look for the full members. Those are all of the ESCOs that we have. Those are a great place to start. You may have a vendor providing controls at your site, and those vendors often provide ESCO services. You might talk to them as well to see where that takes you. But as far as getting started, the idea really is that you want to start with just talking with some ESCO salespeople to understand what exactly can they do and how does it work. When you look at your facilities across the state, there'll be certain rules that you have to follow in order to meet your state requirements. They'll know those rules. They'll be able to guide you through the process of how to get started. They'll be able to show you sample documents. So Department of Energy has sample documents. Lawrence Berkeley National Labs has sample documents. A group called the Energy Services Coalition has sample documents. They're called model contracts that are standardized contracts that you can use to solicit for an ESCO. They guide you through the project creation, the structure, and everything you need to understand the contracts. But the best way probably is to either go to my website and look for energy service companies, or contact the people that are providing services today and ask them if they have contacts at energy service companies, because most of them will.
And in that same light, Tim, if somebody wanted to undergo a vetting process for some of these suppliers and things, do you have pre-vetted ESCO lists that are available?
So we maintain what's called an accredited ESCO list, and you can go also again back to my website and look up accreditation and look at the accredited companies. We have about 35 of our members are accredited. And what accreditation means isn't just means that they filled out a form and they get checked off and go. We maintain an independent committee that does not work for any of the ESCOs, but is familiar with the ESCO community. And they understand it, have a history with the community, and know how it works. And what they do is they take a load of information from the ESCOs and they sort through it. And everybody says, well, yeah, of course, they're going to call the contacts, and the ESCO is going to give you the best contacts. It's all going to work out great. The difference is that our team understands how a project works, and they know that the ESCO is going to give them the best of the best. But when you get into the questions and answers that they ask, they'll spend an hour on the phone with a person. They'll ask detailed, intricate questions. And as they do that, subtleties begin to come out. You begin to develop a relationship with the person at the site, and they begin to tell you their true feelings about how the ESCO performed. And we're looking for the best performance ESCOs to be accredited. They get evaluated for how well they do their projects. They get evaluated for how they develop their savings. They get evaluated for how they look at operation and maintenance and capital savings on a project. We look at their finances of their company to understand, are they a sound, solid company? We ask them about any type of litigation they've had, and they have to explain that, or they can't become accredited. And so our accreditation list is a pretty thorough vetting of a company that's worth doing business with. And that's my recommendation where you go. Many states have a separate process that they vet ESCOs to be able to work with. I don't know if what South Carolina has, just off the top of my head, but I know North Carolina had a list of ESCOs. I worked with Mississippi a couple of weeks ago. They have a list of ESCOs. So most states will have some sort of a preset list of ESCOs that they want you to work with.
Okay. Communication, always obviously an important aspect of a lot of these programs and anything that you're doing in facilities, Tim. If you were going to work with an ESPC and ESCOs and things, and maybe on your end, what kind of a communication team or what kind of organization do you want to have? I guess maybe a better question, who do you want to have at the table when you're making these decisions about the products, process, projects, things like that?
Well, it is interesting. It does take a team of people to make this work out best. You need to have obviously some sort of a person that's a facility person. That's probably where this all starts. It would be best to have a financial person, someone that understands the way you can use your money, that understands what money you have, and also understands basic financials, so they can look at the way the payback works and understand that and accept that. The financial person also probably wants to look at how money is achieved, how money is secured. Because when you do a performance contract, there is a substantial amount of money that is borrowed, and it's borrowed from somewhere. If it's a K through 12 school, they may do a bond issue. Maybe a local government will do a bond issue. Sometimes they'll go out and they have a revolving line of credit. They may do a draw upon that. They may have. I've done university projects where they've used their endowment fund for the funding. The federal government is different. The federal government, the ESCOs supply the financing and go secure it and include that with the project. But with non-federal work, it's best that the customer gets their own funding, because they're often eligible for lower interest rates than the ESCO would be. And that's why the model has developed in that fashion. So that's the financial person. You probably want to have someone from legal on, because you're looking at contracts, and legal always likes to look at contracts. It's what they do. So you've got kind of a mix of people that are going to come together. Sometimes an owner might say, we don't understand this, don't have time to mess with this, and they go hire an outside person. The tendency is to go hire a local engineer that you've worked with before and have him come do that or her come do that, but they may not know performance contracts. I would recommend you talk to an owner's representative if you want that service, because they're going to have familiarity and experience with performance contracts, and they'll know how they work, and they can advise you the best fashion and help you understand when it's best to understand what the ESCO is doing and when it's best to challenge what they're doing. So that's the team, I would say. But I tell you, this is a good opportunity to talk about what's really important. Is when you're doing these projects, it's important that you have your leadership behind it. So we talked about the facility person, the money person, and the law person, but you also have got to have the senior management person. So if that's a school district, the superintendent's a great person to have on board. And the reason is because you're making decision by committee. And when you make decision by committee and you have a lot of people involved, it's so easy for somebody to want to show their value and just say, I think this is wrong, or I think we should do it differently. And leadership helps to smooth that out. It makes the project work smoother, and everyone feels that they have leadership support in making their decisions. So leadership is always important to include.
Okay. Yeah, regarding transparency through these contracts, Tim, how can ESCO help provide the transparency when some of these agreements are multi-year, pretty large, pretty complex? How does ESCO help along with that transparency?
Well, so we're probably talking about how do you validate the performance of the project, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
when you look at the project, so you can hire a third-party validator to come in and validate project, and some places require that. Some places do that. Most do not. Most have the energy service company provide that validation. Typically, what an energy service company will do is as they do their inspections of equipment and validation, they'll take one of your personnel, the site personnel, with them, and they'll sign off and witness the same thing that the ESCO engineer does. And so you get a chance to personally see what they're validating. If that's not enough, you can go hire the third party, but it's often going to be more expensive to do that. But it is possible to do, and ESCOs will work with them to make that work successfully. But by having the ESCO do it, they'll include you in the process. They'll have a sign-off sheet. They'll validate that you saw it and you understand how that works. If you have questions about the calculations, you can have them explain those as well. So I think they're pretty open and transparent in that fashion, that they provide what you need for your own personnel to understand.
Okay. Yeah, we're got a few more questions here left before we can open it up to some of the questions we've gotten from the audience. And again, we encourage you to keep providing those questions, looking through them, some really good questions coming up. Some of those other benefits from ESPCs away from just the energy savings and money, Tim. I know there's, IAQ has been such a big issue especially since COVID, it's emerged. Just occupational changes and the way we work and the way we view our workplaces and things. What are maybe some of those benefits from ESPC that maybe aren't as obvious, that don't, show up in the headlines as big energy savings type?
Yeah.
initiatives.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of benefits that you get from improving your building that you can't really take in a savings profile. Example is when you fix the HVAC system, the heat, ventilation, air conditioning system, and you make that operate like it should, your indoor air quality in almost all cases is better than it was before. It might be you have a lower carbon dioxide content. It might be that you have better temperature regulation. I mean, I've done projects for schools where the kids had to wear coats because the heating system was so poor that it couldn't keep up, and they wore coats in classroom all day. They were having to have coats when they took a test. By replacing the heating system, they could go without their coats. They were more comfortable. I only have to think that the test improvement would be better. Test scores would be better with that than without the project. We don't do studies about that. We talk about that in our process of a performance contract, but it's often not something you could actually capture and enroll into the savings. Indoor air quality is improved because you have better filtration. Many times, existing systems may not have the capacity to heat or cool the outside air sufficiently. And so you'll see blockages put in place of the outside air ducts just to keep the outside air at a minimum because they can't handle that in the facilities. By renovating those systems to the proper sizing, getting design accurate again, and getting the systems refurbished and working properly, you then have the opportunity to bring in the proper amount of outside air, improving the indoor air quality and lowering the carbon dioxide levels inside the building. Lighting levels are another improvement. We see that lighting can improve students' scores quite a bit, and we see that as a benefit. There's also the benefit that you get from just the energy reduction cells. So our projects reduce energy. They improve the carbon atmosphere, the greenhouse gas reduction, just the fact that they change the way you use energy. Those aren't often the thing that drives a project. They may drive the project. Some state and local governments have goals they're trying to meet, but most of the time our projects are driven because you have older equipment that's not operating properly, and the facility does not have the money and has failed at getting that money through standard appropriations process. Performance contracts come in and often can save the day and provide the renovations for that equipment. So your temperature is stable, your lighting is better, your indoor air quality is better. And all those things have a lot of improvement in the wellness of the occupants of the building. So I think there's a lot of unwritten things. There's also, there's things that you get benefit from, but you have a hard time how you monetize those. Carbon credits is one of those things. How do you monetize a carbon credit? They may or may not have any real value. It could just be a theoretical value of what it is. So those really can't be included into a performance contract, but they can be talked about as things that are improved by the performance contract, but there's real no benefit in the payback model from those.
Okay. Yeah, a few more questions here. First one, I guess, was going to ask you about the accreditation program, but you touched on that a little bit earlier, Tim. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to add to that, maybe a little more about what that accreditation program is, or something along those lines.
Say that again, the accreditation program?
Yeah, about NAESCO's accreditation program. You talked about that a little bit earlier, and we're just wondering if there was anything else that you maybe wanted to add to that.
Well, I think the idea is the accreditation program is a great way to select what ESCO you want to use. If you don't have any other guidance, going out to the accreditation list and saying we at least know that these have been vetted by someone, and they provide a service that has been evaluated and determined to be good. That's not saying that a non-accredited company is going to provide bad service. It's just that the accredited company has allowed themselves to voluntarily submit to a process that scrutinizes their work to a high level, and they've passed it with flying colors. That's what accreditation means. It doesn't mean you'll have a bad project with non-accredited company, but it does mean you have some confidence that this company was willing to submit themselves to this process.
Okay, great. So we're going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about some of the events that Tim will be part of here in the next upcoming months here with NAESCO and some interesting opportunities where we can learn more about the process. First one is coming up next month, actually, a little over 2 weeks or so, here at our NFMT Remix program in Orlando, October 15th to 16th. If you haven't signed up for it or interested in that, you can go to nfmt.com to learn more about the conference in general. But Tim will be presenting on one of the sessions regarding regarding the ESCO process and titled his presentation as the building envelope technologies that keep energy costs in check. What is that session going to be a little bit about, Tim, without giving us the all the secrets here a couple weeks before?
Well, thank goodness for descriptive titles, right, Dave? It's going to be about building envelope, Dave.
Shocking.
What we'll talk about is how a performance contract and how a building envelope can provide savings and opportunity in a building. So we'll talk about things like window film. We'll talk about things about insulation. You'll talk about pressure testing in a building. So building envelope is one of those things that sometimes can be a little challenging to include because the payback is often very challenging to make work. But building envelope is often one of the most impactful things you can do to a building because people are always feeling that draft. It's the strangest thing. We as people can be super sensitive to a little stream of air that blows by us that's cold because of a leak in the building. We might be very sensitive to the light coming in from a window. All those things can be fixed through a performance contract. Building envelope is what they're all called. That can be roofs, doors, windows. It can be window film. A lot of these things are considered building envelopes. So we'll talk about those and how those fit together into an overall project.
Okay. And then, regarding also coming up in November is NAESCO's hosting its annual R3 conference, which is in Las Vegas. I had a chance to attend it last year for the first time. Found it very informative and had personally brought back a lot of story ideas and things and learned a little bit more about the organization. But Tim, if you could tell us a little bit about the conference, what people can expect to see there, and what they can learn a little bit more about should they choose to attend.
So we're going to have some sessions about public-private partnerships. We're going to have some sessions about our new Sustainable Capital Improvement Program, Sustainable Capital Improvement Project legislation that we're working on. Those are both P3 energy as a service type of structures. We'll talk about those and how they're affecting our industry. We'll talk about K through 12 school session. We've got some sessions talking about the capital investment that's happening in our industry. But one of the things that I want to mention about our group is the energy service company industry is very much guided by relationship building. And the reason is that when you select an energy service company in the process of selection, often the scope of work does not exist. And because the scope of work doesn't exist, you're picking a company that will come in and develop the scope of work and then build it. The energy service company then is selected based on their qualifications. And that means that their past recommendations, their past clients all come into play. And so they work really hard on relationship building. And relationship building is something we work hard to include in our annual conference. And so while we have several technical sessions that will be very pertinent to the industry, we also have time where people get to network and communicate with one another. Through our trade show floor, we have an exhibit floor that is very comprehensive with a lot of our members displaying and non-members displaying as well. It's been sold out since middle of summer, so it should be a great show. The idea is that the relationship goes both ways, from the ESCO to their client and from the ESCO to their suppliers. Because remember, if you install something for an ESCO, that ESCO has to live with that thing for 20 years. If you're not around for the 20 years, or you're not a willing participant in working with that ESCO over problems over that 20 years, they don't want to work with you. And so that relationship has got to be strong, that they know you're there, you're repeated there, they see you often, they understand that you're there for the long haul and will help them support these projects. Just like they have to support them to their client, they want to know that you're going to support it for them. So it's a great time to build those relationships as well as learn about the industry.
Okay. Well, thanks, Tim. Yeah, that's kind of the end of the fireside chat portion of our conversation. But I'd like to go to some of the questions we've received here from the attendees. And again, keep sending those in. We've got still a little time here to answer some questions. So first out of the gate is Timothy, who was wondering about how many GSA-approved ESCOs that you've seen like in 2025. I know GSA's had a lot of changes with their buildings and everything. And I guess he was just wondering about your thoughts on the GSA process there.
Well, so GSA has actually let out quite a few projects this year for performance contracts. I think if you go look at the Federal Energy Management Program, does maintain a list of the projects that have been awarded, And I don't have the web address for that, but it's pretty easy to find. If you just go look up FIMP ESPC, they have a significant amount of assets on the web for those. And once you find that list, you'll be able to see the projects awarded. You'll see that there are several large GSA projects awarded this year. I think there's 3 or 4 large projects. But it is good to note that the federal government has been down in their performance contracting the last couple of years. And while they did award several GSA projects, they still are down from what they historically have done. Historically, they've seen often a throughput of about $1 billion a year.
Okay. Paul was wondering about the energy as a service contracts and wondering, as a type of ESCO. And I'm just saying what he says here. Obviously, it isn't, but as far as the association is concerned, are you working with those as well, those energy as a service?
Well, we certainly are. We have had and have members who are doing energy as a service. Most of our energy service companies are providing some sort of energy as a service as their offering. Our sustainable capital improvement project legislation is essentially an energy as a service type of offering. So we're very much involved in energy as a service. Our annual meeting coming in November, we have a special working group session on energy as a service before our conference actually begins. We've done this at 2 other conferences as well, and they've been well received. We're going to do it again. We think that they're intricately tied. We think energy as a service is really just a different form for ESCOs to deliver, and many are already involved in that. So yes, we support that industry. We think that it is strong and growing, and we see that our members are some of the most significant contributors and participants in energy as a service today.
Okay. Richard had a question here. Wondering what the limits of liability are for the engineer of record when the design is guided by the NAESCO in conjunction with the owner.
Well, let's be frank. If there's an engineer designing a project for an ESCO, clearly the engineer will be reactive to the ESCO, the client's needs on the project, but the engineer has the responsibility to design the project that they know works and meets the regulations and the standards and all the codes as necessary. So when the engineer is doing that, they have to be guided by their customer, but they don't get controlled by the customer. So they are the engineer of record, and that remains true even in an ESCO project.
Okay.
I'm a registered engineer myself, and I understand, you have pressures from your client, but you have the professional responsibility as an engineer to maintain the proper design to meet the codes and standards that are required for that project.
Okay. Douglas was wondering what criteria you would use to qualify to pre-qualify ESCOs for an ITQ type of contract.
Well, I think if I was a state government setting this up, I would say I want you to be NAESCO accredited. It's an independent organization. It's got an accreditation already, and I would start there. And then I would look at any special circumstances in my state. Do I want experience in my state? Do I want experience using my state process? Do I have any particular physical requirements for the projects? Do I have a big opportunity for landfill gas projects? I may want to see some experience in those. And so my process would be I'd start with the accredited list and then add on my particular uniqueness that I thought I had needs for and ask for qualifications in that area.
Okay. Yeah, we've got some really good questions here coming up yet still. So Douglas also wanted to know if anybody, or I guess would be asking you, Tim, if anybody had any luck with monetizing carbon savings.
Yeah, I had mentioned this before. I saw Doug's question come through, and that's one of the reasons I mentioned carbon savings is when you monetize the carbon savings, you're trying to get that cost of carbon included in projects. The challenge is with a performance contract, the savings that you generate comes from a budgeted amount. And today, we don't budget for carbon costs. And so we haven't really found a way to monetize that into a performance contract because it doesn't exist in the existing budget. Once there's a penalty for carbon emissions, it'll be easy to include. But today that doesn't happen. And so no, we have not monetized carbon savings at this point.
Okay. Let's see. Timothy was wondering about if there are copies available of that Oak Ridge National Lab paper that you'd referenced that I thought you said John Saunders had written.
Yeah, the person's name the author is John Schonder, Shonder,
Okay.
and it was published by Oak Ridge National Labs, and it was published probably back about early 2020s. So probably 2021, 22, 23 type of time frame. And I think if you just do an internet search on those, you probably can find it fairly straightforward.
Okay. James had a question regarding, here's his question. How are ESCOs approaching operational technology risk mitigation today compared to past years? And how much cost is that adding to an overhead on the average? And he's wondering if there's an unknown on there, are there maybe studies planned to look at something like that?
How much cost is that adding to the overhead on average? So approaching operational technology risk. The ESCOs are going to put in things that they have a history of proper functioning. So we always like to say that the ESCOs will put in leading edge, but not bleeding edge technologies. And the challenge is that they don't want to put something in that's too far out to cause a technology risk, simply because they have to live with it for 20 years. And often early manufacturers and early advanced technologies may not necessarily have the staying power to support a project for a long duration time. So it doesn't mean that an ESCO won't install the most advanced components, but they want to make sure they understand the technology, understand the manufacturer, that they're solid. So if a large corporation has many diverse line of projects, has a new product that's really advanced, probably pretty easy to install that. But if a small single manufacturer has something, you have to understand, are they going to be staying with it? We have some of those as members. I'm going to talk about one or two of those. We have a company called AeroSeal that installs a spray that goes into a duct that seals the duct from leakage. We have a company called Powersmiths that has a transformer that is a super high efficient transformer. Both of these were independent companies that come into the market, but they've been able to demonstrate the staying power of their technology and the staying power of their company, and ESCOs have adopted them in mass. And so how do you manage technology risk? You've got to understand who you're buying it from and their ability to continue to support you. That's really what the ESCOs try to do.
Okay. Yeah, we have a few more questions. Are you able to hang on for a little bit after the hour, Tim, or do you have?
I am, and I'm actually going to paste in. I don't know if you can share that with the audience, but that is the paper that I mentioned. One of the papers I mentioned, additional savings. There are some other papers, but that at least gets you started with the author, okay. John Schonder. You can begin to look further. That's not quite the paper I was referring to, but there's some other ones.
Okay. Let's see. Valjeans asks, some ESCOs do the savings verification as well, and do you recommend this or having a separate third-party verification?
So we talked about this a little bit. I think that question came up earlier about that, and I feel like you can have that either way. Having a third party might be more costly than having the ESCO, but I can't guarantee that. I know that what the ESCO does is the ESCO has someone from your site go with you, validate what you observe. Many times the savings are demonstrated by observing something in a performance of the equipment or measuring something and seeing a number on a display on a device. It may be through the control system. It could be through handheld devices. And you have that local staff person validate that with the energy service company. They sign off. We saw this. They document it. And then that same number gets entered into the same equations that were used to produce the savings. So that's how the ESCO does it. That's fairly transparent, and that's how they handle the transparency issue, is they have witnessed measurements occur. You can have a third party. If you would like to have somebody completely independent come and validate, you can do that as well.
Okay. Mary Beth was wondering how to find a list of energy departments within the states, and then within that list, approved ESCOs.
Yeah, Mary Beth is actually a good friend of mine and a member of NAESCO. Her company does refrigeration savings. And Mary Beth, I wish I had an easy link I could give you so you could find that, but you tend to have to go through each state and have to look for those things individually. The way each state classifies their energy office is unique. Sometimes it's not even the energy office that runs that solicitation. I think in Florida, it was done by the Department of Agriculture. So you you have to go to the state and begin doing your own sleuthing. I wish I had a little easier way for you, but that's the best approach.
Okay. John is wondering, what you think of third-party reporting of value of real-time data, or EDASS, in confirming 5 to 10 year projects?
Let's see. I'm looking for that question so I can read that, because that's a fairly complex question.
Yeah, number 16.
All right. Let's see. 16. What do you think third-party reporting of value of real-time data, or EDAAS, in confirming 5-year projects? So I think what he's asking is data that you gather real time today, and third party, I'm guessing maybe through external monitoring of a control system or a power meter, in confirming 5 to 10 year projects. I think there is value in looking at the real-time data to understand the projects. Remember, when we do energy savings performance contract projects, you have 100% of the building savings. And let's say that the project saves 20% of that 100%. When we do these projects, there's always energy conservation measures that we know they work, like lighting. And there's those ones that we think they work pretty well, and we've got calculations, but there's some variability in human involvement and some weather impact that may change that. And so if you look at that, often lighting savings is pretty big. And so maybe only half of that 20%. So we're looking for maybe 10% of the utility bill in the variation. So it's hard to look at the overall facility use to find that 10%. And we often know that we're probably going to get at least 80% of the savings, probably 95% of the savings, but we're going to guarantee 100% of the savings. So the challenge is you're looking for a little bit of a needle in the haystack, depending on how you gather your data. If you gather it at the whole building meter, it's challenging. If you gather it at the specific equipment you impacted through the project and are looking for its performance, I think that the energy data can provide a lot of insight and a lot of additional possibilities for the building. I think that also you do need the whole building meter to also try to identify overall anomalies, and then use the individual components down at the equipment to identify further work. I think what he's asked for is EDAAS, I'm guessing, is energy data as a service. So it's some outside party monitoring things in the building to try to determine the opportunities to take the savings further than where they're currently at. I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. I think there's a good amount of savings you get for that. I will tell you that the savings really depends upon the ability of the site to be interested and motivated to continue the savings. If you put a control system in a building and the building facility manager says, I don't want to have to check that control system, I might look at it once every couple of weeks, and that's all I want to do. Versus another building that says, oh, I'm so excited about this control system, I can't wait to monitor this. I'm going to put it on my phone. I'm going to be able to walk through the site and change things as people need things. And as I see opportunities, I can fix it right there. Which one do you think will save more energy? It's obviously one with a more proactive person. So the team on site depends a lot on your success. And so that's why I think energy data as a service is effectively outsourcing that excited guy on the right. And I think that person can do a lot of things. And I think the EDAS can provide a lot of savings for a project.
All right, we got 2 more questions here, and then we're going to let you get going here, Tim. And again, we really appreciate the information. It's been a great hour plus here. Susan wondering about any examples of an energy as a service or ESCO done with a university campus in the U.S. I guess maybe just kind of an example she's maybe looking for.
So I didn't come prepared for the examples for that, so I can't throw something off the top of my head of a particular location, but I have heard my members talk about universities have been one of the more aggressive adopters of energy as a service. There are some of these big projects, these big P3 projects that have been done at Ohio State and Iowa State, and you can go look at those, but I think you really want to look at maybe some projects that the individual ESCOs have done. Many times they're not called energy as a service, but they have energy as a service components. But I'm sorry, Susan, I don't have an example I can just throw out here for you that you go look at right this moment.
Okay. And the final question here will come from Mark regarding, does NAESCO work with individual states on marketing and outreach, and do you have state chapters?
So we do not have state chapters. We tend to be a more of a national organization. The best way to reach out and get associated with an ESCO is go onto my website and look at the ESCOs that are out there and identify the ones that you've run into. As an HVAC equipment vendor, you more than likely have had them come to your site and maybe even purchase from you in the past. Go look at them. Many of them are large companies like Johnson Controls, Honeywell, Trane, Siemens, Schneider, and so forth. Look at those companies and contact somebody and say, do you have somebody you know in the ESCO division? And you'll find those ESCO division people will be identified, and that's how you win that relationship. I can't help but self-promote, I'm sorry, but joining NAESCO and getting an association activity in the organization will also help you get more familiar with the ESCOs and have the opportunity to become more familiar with them and build that relationship with them.
Great. Okay. Well, yeah, we're going to wrap things up here now, Tim. And again, thanks for the great information. Hopefully we can personally catch up with you in Orlando next month during your presentation, and perhaps at your national show. But I guess before I let you go, do you have any kind of wrap-ups or final thoughts you maybe want to leave the attendees with?
Yeah, I think we live in a great time to do an energy project. It's a big focus. There's a lot of national attention to it, but there's an opportunity for your buildings to have improvements that can be paid for through energy and operational savings. I think one of the key things to remember is from our public buildings stand, we have a lot of deferred maintenance, a lot of maintenance that we just haven't had the money to do because nobody likes to fund facility improvements. I think there's a study for K through 12 schools that says there's like $82 billion of deferred maintenance. So there's a ton of opportunity. Engineers, I know they don't want to try to release their clients to an ESCO, but the engineers, ESCOs will work with an engineer with a client to try to take that engineered project and take it further than what it was before. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to take an ESCO work, combine it with the savings, combine it with what you were going to do, and get more done to help get that deferred capital down and make our buildings better for the American public.
Great. And again, thanks to everybody for attending our event today. And one final reminder that this event was recorded and will be archived on facilitiesnet.com. Once again, thanks again, Tim, for the time, and we thank everybody else for attending. And this will conclude our event. So everybody have a great day.
Thanks. Good talking with you.